This week I'm going to take this piece of apple wood and turn it into a water bottle. It's a fun project. Please stay tuned to see how I've done it. This is a relatively new tool for me. It's a roughing gouge. It's much heavier than the bowl gouge, and it's a good tool to use in the beginning when the log or bowl is not round. This gouge will take a lot more beating than the bowl gouge will. Right now I'm still turning between centers, and every once in a while you'll see that the log actually stops spinning. If I take too deep of a cut or get a little bit of a catch, it will actually stop the log and it will just spin on that live center. I do want to get it as round as I can at this point and also cut the tenon so, as you can see here, I can get it mounted in my chuck. By now I've got it pretty round, and I'm starting to use my caliper gauges to make sure that the diameter is where I need it to be. This project, the wall thickness is going to be fairly thin, probably 1/8 of an inch or less. So I have to make sure that I'm fairly uniform. The other thing is, I've just determined where the bottom of this water bottle is going to be by holding up the plastic water bottle that's going to end up being the liner inside this wooden sleeve. At this point, I'm not going to cut the bottom off yet, but I'm going to cut a tenon there so that I can mount it in my lathe and continue to work on the water bottle itself. Right here you can see that I have a crack, and I also have some discoloring around that crack. So I'm actually just going to use a little bit of sawdust and CA glue to fill that and then sand it down smooth. You can still see it when it's all done, but because of the discoloration, it doesn't look like a crack, it just looks like some discoloration. And it's actually a pretty nice fix, in my opinion. Your fingers are actually a fairly good gauge at determining uniform thickness. So one of the things I've done is any spot that I feel is a little high, I just use my pencil and make a mark and then come back and sand those marks off until I've got what feels like a uniform diameter throughout the whole piece. Now I'm applying my homemade sanding sealer, which sands it up to 1000 grit. So I've got to drill the inside of this out, and I had to mount it because I've already cut the bottom tenon off because I've got a drill through there, so that had to go. I already had a hole drilled in this end for the water bottle to come out, and this is too big around to fit in my chuck. So I'm going to turn a small tenon on here so that I can mount it in my chuck so that I can drill the bottom out. So all I did was I took a scrap piece of this apple wood, turned a tenon on it here that will fit inside the hole that I drilled, and now I have a friction drive, and that works fine. So now I can turn my tenon on here, mount it more securely. This is fine to turn a tenon, this friction drive, but I wouldn't trust it to drill this out. That's going to be a tough go. And I'm going to use my steady rest as well. So we'll go ahead, turn a small tenon and get drilling. Now, this is the first time I've used this. This is a steady rest, although this picture looks like it's not very steady. It is wobbling back and forth, but I tightened it down a little bit and it took that wobble out. This is a homemade device, and it's used when you're extending out so far away from the chuck. I did not make this. A friend of mine let me use his, and thank you very much, Willie, for that. Now that I've finally drilled it all out, and it did take a while, I had to stop and sharpen my drill a couple times, I just measured the depth to make sure that I didn't go too far. And you can see there I was using a homemade depth gauge to do that. So making this water bottle involved 3 pieces: the sleeve, the plug at the bottom, which I'm turning here, excuse my head, and also the cap, which I'll show later. So this piece is mounted in my chuck. This was actually the bottom of the sleeve that I had showed earlier. And I just cut a mortise on that, or sorry, a tenon, and just very carefully made sure that it was the exact right diameter to fit inside the sleeve, because I'm going to glue that in place eventually once I get the water bottle inserted. Now I have a few options. This is ready. It's been polished on the outside with my abrasive paste, so that's up to 1,000 grit. The hole has been cut on this end to allow the water bottle threaded piece to come out, and it's been hollowed out here all the way through. I've also cut a plug that fits perfectly in the bottom of this with a tenon so I can mount it, and then eventually I'll cut this off. So at this point, before I insert the bottle here, I need to make this hole just a little bit bigger. And I need to get rid of this tenon, which means I'll no longer be able to mount it from this end into my chuck. But the bottom piece has a tenon on it. So I can put that piece in and still mount it from this way, and then work this end and completely finish this end before I insert the bottle. I won't glue this yet because I want to get the bottle in first, and then I'll glue this piece in. And then once I get the threaded piece up here, I'll be able to mount it with that and then turn it around again. That'll become obvious as I go along. Some of the audio I do after I finish turning, and I do a voiceover as this piece here is. It took me a second to realize what I was doing in this video, but at this point I have the tailstock in the opening that's at the top of the water bottle, and I'm just squaring that top off and also just rounding over that edge a little bit so it's not as sharp. Without tailstock pressure, there's nothing keeping this on this friction fit. Nothing until now, that is. Now the bottom will stay, because I haven't glued that yet. I don't want to glue that in the bottom until I get the bottle inserted. So now I'm going to clean this up, get rid of the remaining piece of that tenon, which I couldn't do with my tailstock engaged. Here's a better view of the steady rest. You can see now that it is in fact not moving around. I did tighten it up again, as I mentioned. And this is really important, that you have a steady rest. There's no way that I could turn this and be that far away from the chuck and then work the end piece like this. It would just break off from the chuck itself. The other thing is, and you're going to see in a moment, there's 3 wheels that are holding this in place, and underneath those wheels, that's the reason I have that tuck tape there, because otherwise those wheels will mark the wood up, so the tape is just there to protect it. I think this may be the only shot showing the front of the steady rest, and now you can see the 3 wheels on the arms there that you can adjust so that they're tight on the piece that you're turning. You can see here what I'm going to do. I just inserted the bottle in the sleeve. It fits well, although I do have to enlarge the hole a little bit in order for it to fit. I ended up sanding just a little bit around the lip. I could push it in backwards this way, but I was having a hard time to get it to come up from the bottom. So I just sanded the opening a little bit, tapered it, so that the opening wasn't any bigger, but it would slide in. Fortunately, I didn't catch it on film, but it snapped into place rather nicely, and now I really can't get it back out. But that's the tight fit that I want. You can see now that the lip is above the top of the water bottle, so that's exactly what I want. Probably don't even need to glue that in place. It's pretty tight. It does slide back and wiggle a little bit, so I may glue it just to take that wiggle out. But pretty pleased with the way it fits in. Here I'm just inserting the plug that's going to go into the bottom of the water bottle, and I'm just doing a test fit on it. The water bottle, I put a sacrificial cap on it, and that's actually inside the chuck, and that's what's holding this in place right now. So I can't put a lot of pressure as I turn this. I've got to take some small cuts because it is just being held by the plastic cap inside the chuck. And I also don't want to damage the threads on the bottle. It's okay for the cap because, again, that's just a sacrificial, but I don't want to damage the male threads on the water bottle itself. Between now and the last scene that you just saw, I actually decided rather than turn all of that plug down so it's flush, I actually took it out of the lathe, took it over to the bandsaw, and just cut the bottom off. And now I'm just going over it very lightly just to even everything up so that the bottom plug is a good fit and is not proud of the water bottle itself. Now I'm just sanding the bottom plug. It is a nice fit, and I did glue it into place, but now I'm just sanding the bottom of it. This is a smaller piece of cherry that I'd cut off. I just mounted that onto a faceplate with screws, and then I turned what's going to be the cap. I turned it down to the diameter I want, and then I also drilled this out. The diameter of this and the depth of this is going to be just enough that I can put the original pop bottle cap glued inside of it, and then that's how this wooden block will get threaded on to my water bottle. Here you can see the cap is in place. It's still attached to the piece of wood that's mounted to the faceplate, and now I'm starting to apply the finish. I've already sanded it up to my regular 600 grit, applied my polishing paste, and that's what I'm doing here, applying that polishing paste to the whole bottle. But it's starting to take shape, and you can see what the finished product is going to look like. Here's the finished product. I love the way it turned out. I'm a big fan of apple wood. It's got beautiful color, and it's got a nice grain as well. And again, just a fun little project. Let me know in the comments what you think. Here you can see my logo in the bottom of the water bottle, as well as a decorative ring. Again, let me know what you think of this project. Thank you very much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Please take the time to subscribe so that you won't miss any future videos, and also share it with your friends.